I am a big fan of Primaris Space Marines. I like a big, chunky Space Marine model, and I've worked my way through almost every single Space Marine kit. But there's a couple that I'm not in love with, but I do want to add to the crusade. And one of those is the Primaris Inceptors box. I flip-flop on the Space Marine Inceptors. Sometimes I think they're cool and awesome, sometimes I think they're chubby babies dropping out of the sky. These guys were in a Space Marine list I ran in a tournament, and I actually bought them for that purpose, but I haven't put them together for months and months and months. I got really lucky, and a few days before the tournament, on the used shelf at my friendly local game store, there were some put together black Templar Inceptors, and so I ended up using those guys, and I never got around to building this box. In the catalog of Space Marines, the Eradicators, the Suppressors, the Incursors, the Liberators, the Intercessors, I made one of those up. Leave a comment if you caught it. These guys are probably my least favorite. I like them in concept, but not so much in execution. However, now that I have the box, the execution is in my hands, so see if I can come up with something. Cracking open some new plastic crack is always a good time. These were originally push-fit minis out of the Dark Imperium box, but soon after got this multi-part plastic kit. And there are so many parts. Each backpack is 11 parts. They do look good though. And a 3-man squad isn't too many models, so it's okay for each guy to take a little longer. To start making these guys my own, I shaved off the chest Imperialis on 2 of these guys, and then finished assembling them, minus the arms. The arms are trouble. I have reached the weapons for the Primaris Inceptors, and I think this is my big problem with this squad. I don't like the mega pistols. Number 1, way too big. Each pistol is like the size of his chest, and the hoses that run to these pistols are wider than his wrist. It just looks really, really silly and inelegant, which kind of goes against the Space Marines. Space Marines are the pinnacle of combat, and looking at the old Devastator squad, which these guys are kind of a Devastator squad, you totally believe that the Space Marine could set down the heavy bolter, pull out his combat knife, and be just as effective as any other battle brother. But with these guys, like, what are they gonna do? They don't have holsters, the guns are way too big. Are they gonna drop them and then fist fight a Chaos Space Marine with the guns just dragging on the ground behind them? I don't like the big guns, and I don't think I have to use them. I'm gonna steal some plasma guns from this box. Space Marine Hellblasters. I like the look of these plasma guns a lot, and I think this will give me a lot of great options for posing. Now, it will set me back 3 plasma guns when I go to put this box together, but that's not really gonna matter. I have big plans for my Hellblaster squad, and I might have some things coming from eBay, some bits, and so it won't matter that I'm missing a couple of plasma guns because the Inceptors stole them. Cracking open another new box of plastic crack, the Hellblasters have their long plasma rifles. And when these models first hit the scene, the very subtle differences between the guns, the flashlight tip with scope, and backpack hoses represented 3 different guns with 3 different profiles. I remember really poring over the 8th edition rulebook, math hammering out what would be the optimal pick. Now in 10th edition, these have all been rolled into one plasma incinerator profile, which is probably for the best. I'm a little worried about these guns, because the Hellblasters wear the Mark 10 tactical armor and the Inceptors wear Gravis armor, but I'll just have to try it out and see what happens. These guns are also a lot of pieces. Dry fitting them onto my Inceptors, the little arm keys have to go. I scrape them smooth and then retry the arms, and they seem to fit pretty good. A little bit of plastic glue and they fit great. I gave 2 of them 2-handed plasma incinerators, and the Sergeant, I gave him a blaster held in one hand and a plasma pistol for the other. This is one of my favorite plasma pistol arms in all of 40k, because it's a robot hand and seems to imply that the plasma gun detonated taking off the Marine's original hand. Now that my new guns are on, I mixed up some green stuff and then looked over my black Templar upgrade frame for some Gravis Templar symbols. I used a few of these and a few of the plain shoulders. This will help me get some good Templar goodness out of these guys, and the green stuff is needed because these arms are a little smaller than the originals. Now for the noggins. The Inceptor heads are annoyingly keyed into specific poses, which I didn't like. So I cut off their neck pegs and found 2 helmeted heads that I liked, and I went with a bear head from the Templar upgrade frame. He's wearing super heavy armor and flying through the air at incredible speeds, but he doesn't need a helmet. He looks cooler without it. Now that I have the poses, I can attach all the little steering flaps. The bottom ones are a little harder to pose, but the top ones I just had to shave down 1 peg each, and then the ball joint gave total freedom. I glued these on to match each guy's unique weapon pose. My 3 little flyboys are looking tactical. I think they look so much better with 1 reasonable sized gun as opposed to 2 humongous guns. I've got these guys built, I got them posed up. Now, before I do the rest of the embellishing, I wanna see them in situ. I wanna see them on bases before I put on all of the purity seals and all the other little goodies I have in store for these suckers. Now this is gonna be another challenge because these guys are meant to go on the clear flying stands. And I think these new ones are even worse than the old ones. They are incredibly breakable, so I don't wanna use these. I wanna come up with something else. I already have some Space Marine suppressors. I built these guys as bases using some wood chips I stole from the park. I think these guys look pretty dapper, so I wanna make some bases that look a lot like these. I swapped out the GW bases for some Cobalt Keep magnet ones, and then I broke out the cork. Thick 1/2 inch cork, and I tore some triangles of these and glued them together with lots of ultra thin super glue. Then I cut the bottoms of these on an angle with a saw. The cork is nice and soft, so the saw blade blasts right through it. Then I ripped the cork into cone shapes with my fingers and then glued it down to the base with more super glue. Now that I've got my earthy spears, they're looking a little too corky, so I grabbed some wood filler and lathered up my cork towers with this, giving them one wet coat and then wiping away most of the putty with a wet paper towel. It sticks around in the recesses, smoothing the cork to make it look much more in scale with cliffs these boys are rocketing up from or crash landing on. I drilled up through the model's leg and inserted a 1mm brass rod that I left really long. I stabbed this into the cork and it's a little tricky to center the mini properly over the base, but with some trial and error, I got all my boys falling with style. Around the edge of the bases, I brushed on some wood glue and then sprinkled on the sand and pebbles I used for the rest of my Templars minis. And the bases are done. Now to pretty up these suckers. I took some small jewelry chain and draped it over the sergeant's neck, using ultra thin super glue to stick it down. Then I took a little reliquary from the intercessor sprue and glued it on. I have a little more room, so I took a little sheet of dried green stuff and carved a tiny shield to go on the other side of the chain as well. Now for some purity seals. I took all the seals from the Inceptor box and half the seals from the Hellblaster kit and sprinkled these onto each guy. Black Templars love their purity seals. I have some more leftover green stuff, so I made up another little shoulder shield, and for the sergeant, I stole the backpack topper from the Sword Brethren box and attached it to the sergeant. The last step on these fellows are the skulls. My Templars wear the skulls of their fallen battle brothers on their armor so that even in death, they can crusade eternally. I drilled into the heads of the skulls to insert some sewing straight pins for scale nails. Is it a good idea to hammer nails into ultra high-tech equipment? I'm sure nothing can go wrong. The Inceptor squad is all around an excellent Space Marine unit. Throughout 10th edition, they have been ungodly powerful auto-include and a little bit too pricey. They got nerfed, but now they're sitting pretty at just a really solid Space Marine unit for 120 points. Their special ability is Meteoric Descent. They can drop down 6 inches away from enemies as opposed to the normal 9 inches away. It used to be 3 inches, and that was a little bit too good. So 6 inches is a good fair middle ground. And you really can't go wrong with these suckers. Actually, you can go wrong with them, and that is all about the weapons. Inceptor squads can pick between 2 different weapon loadouts, and they're pretty well balanced, the bolters or the plasma. The bolters are really good. They're basically heavy bolters with sustained hits too. Only a couple of things in the game have sustained hits too. That's every 6 you roll is 3 successful hit rolls that are gonna go into the twin-linked wound pile, which is really, really spicy. AP -1, damage 2. They're really, really tempting. But looking at my Black Templar army, I have a lot of things. Actually, basically the entire army is really good at killing like guardsmen, orcs, and marines. I don't need more things that are really good at killing those. I need some heavy hitters, and that is the plasma. You gotta overcharge them to get them to that strength 8, but then AP -3, flat damage 3, love to see it. You can actually probably kill some pretty tough nuggets. I was playing a game against Sean's World Eaters, and there was one rhino, and I made it my Oath of Moment target. I really wanted this rhino to die, and so I shot my army at it, didn't manage to kill it, so then I dropped in the suppressors, and these aren't suppressors, these are Inceptors. And these guys unloaded their plasma shots into the rhino, like re-rolling the hit, re-rolling the wound. I did nothing. I biffed it, like one single attack went through and then he saved it on a 6. They just completely whiffed it. It was not the Inceptor's fault, it was user error, but I wanna try again. I wanna bring, and now that they're gonna be lovely, they're obviously gonna perform much better because painted models always play better than unpainted models. Time to give these guys the Templar treatment. I started out priming all my minis in black. I left the backpacks unglued for now so I can reach back in there with the primer. Then I gave them a zenithal of white ink. The white ink runs beautifully through the airbrush, but is a little fragile, so I gave them a coat of satin varnish to seal it in. After that, I dry brushed them with some white paint to highlight all the edges of their armor in preparation for some washing. My Black Templar base is made up of a soup of contrast paints: Black Templar, Leviathan Blue, and Lamian Medium. I put this on all the armor, and I tried my best to miss the foot skids, weapons, and shoulder pads. And speaking of those shoulder pads, I like an aged bone look, so I started out with a watery down coat of Skeleton Horde, and then an even waterier coat of Wildwood. I put this on all the shoulders, skulls, and purity seals. Looking at my models so far, they're a little bit dark. I put white ink into my airbrush and sprayed this onto their shoulders to brighten them up a little bit. And I dusted this onto the big round volumes of their backpack to smooth the contrast paint and brighten them up just a little bit. Now, trying to make some decisions on my flyboys, I broke out the Templar iconography page from 5th edition. There's not a ton to go off of. I suppose these guys are 50-50 Assault Marines and Devastator Marines, but Black Templar basically make it all up, so I broke out the decals. I took some decals from the Black Templar Space Knights mix and heraldry sheets available at EonsOfBattle.com. EonsOfBattle.com is the place to find merch like our EOB dice, wet pallets, waterslide decals, and basing toppers and bits. And it is also the best way to support us with memberships. Each month, members get a credit that they can use on our new monthly terrain packs or any previous pack we have ever made. I loaded these guys up with decals. Since these guys are in Gravis armor, there was a lot more room to splash out on. I put a white cross on all the backpacks and crosses all over their shoulders and knees. This chain fit perfectly around the exhaust of one of the jump packs, and these campaign badges fit really nicely onto the packs as well. Now my Marines are bedazzled, I can start filling in the rest of the details, starting with their feet skids. I sponged on some white paint and then put some Noble Skin speed paint over these to tint them gray. I put this on the guns as well. This tints them gray, and then a dry brushing with some silver over top to get these spots looking nice and gunmetal. Now for the red. I base coated all the shoulder trim, purity seal wax, and knee pads with a dark red, and then I started sketching on some highlights of a brighter red, working in layers up to pure red. I really like my Templar recipe because they come together so fast. I can spend some serious time perfecting things like the reflections of their shoulder pads, and freehanding checkerboards on the knees, while still getting them done in a reasonable amount of time. I switched to Legendary Red for the final highlights. This is a red-orange color, and I used it sparingly for the few brightest spots of the red. With the red done, another huge part of these minis is finished. Now onto the yellow. I like yellow on my Templar weapons, so I base coated the weapon armors with yellow, and I used an orange glaze to add in some contrast. After that, a little bit of a glazing of an off-white for the brightest highlights, and then it was time for the plasma. I go classic blue for my plasma glow, base coating the ribs and letting the blue spill onto the yellow just a little bit to get some object source lighting started. I did a few more layers of this blue, glazing it over the yellow, and I was really having some trouble getting a smooth finish, so I put this blue into my airbrush and sprayed it on carefully. After that, I glazed some light blue over the ribs, and then I glazed a little bit of white for the brightest glow. I did a little bit of dry brushing of my original blue to darken the plasma coils, and with the guns done, I forgot to hit the eyes while I was working on the red. I gave them some angry red eye lenses. One of these suckers has his helmet off. I try to have at least one helmet off in each squad for variety. I base coated the face with a very saturated red beige, and then mixed in more and more off-white to brighten the colors for the highlights. I hit the hair with some dark brown, and speaking of brown, I painted brown on the skulls and purity seals. I used the same colors for both of these details so I can speed up the paint job using less colors and less steps. And speaking of skulls, there are a ton of skulls in our campaign, The Catacombs of the Blessed Dead. The Catacombs of the Blessed Dead is live now, a collaboration between Eons of Battle and Trench Crusade. An official set of terrain, labyrinths of deadly corridors and claustrophobic hallways studded with the bones of the blessed men and women who have fallen in holy war. In addition, we have our own resin cast minis, the Catacombs Sappers and the Grace of Flesh. The campaign is live now, you can follow it through the link in the description below. My minis are now done. I threw on a satin varnish to protect them, and then a sponging of silver paint for paint chips. This, after the varnish, keeps these spots bright and glittery. Now for those bases. My Templar bases are incredibly simple. Step 1 is some Vallejo earth thinned down through the airbrush. This watery mix lets the values from the zenithal shine through, and then a heavy dry brushing of pro acryl olive flesh to hit on all the edges and sand. Then I put a gloss black paint on the rim of the base, but I'm not done yet. Top supporters on our website get their names on one of my Black Templars to join my crusade. And we've gotten a lot of interest in these nameplates we've invented, so we're now offering them on our website. You can get your own custom nameplates. To get this plate ready, I sprayed it in gold and gave it a little puff of silver in the middle for a highlight, and then dripped some black panel liner to get the letters to stand out proudly. Once this was dry, I varnished it and then glued it onto the base, introducing Night Wolf, newest member of my crusade. One Primaris Inceptor squad added to the collection. Actually, I think Primaris is getting dropped from a lot of Space Marine unit names. I wonder if in 11th edition, Primaris will just be gone and it'll just be all Space Marines. These guys are looking pretty slick with my modifications, and I'm gonna have to do these modifications again because I have one more squad of 3 of these suckers that I need to kitbash and convert. And I might pick up another box because I do kind of want some of the bolter Inceptors. I like WYSIWYG, and I think I have enough heavy bolters that I could give each of them an actual Devastator Squad heavy bolter instead of the bolter pistols. I might have to build a lot more of these guys. And speaking of these guys, my favorite thing in Space Marines is just the regular old vanilla Space Marines. And I feel like without the giant pistols and tubes, these guys feel very much like regular old Space Marines, just with a little bit bigger of a jetpack. I really like it when I can make the regular old Space Marines really do some work. I want to put together the other 3-man squad I have so that I can have a full 6-man brick of plasma, because if I take them in Vanguard Spearhead Detachment with the stratagem that gives me +1 attack and +1 AP, that's some pretty big damage coming out of these little old Space Marines with jetpacks. I remember back in the early days of Primaris when these guys first got shown off, thinking that they were fine. I was a little bit of a Primaris poo-pooer when everything was first coming out, because there wasn't enough. Everything was just a bog standard intercessor, but now the Primaris is getting kind of old. I feel like there is plenty of models out there to kitbash and convert to make them look exactly how I want them to look. Now I've got a squad of perfect Inceptors. I don't know, maybe the next challenge is Gravis, or what are they called? What are the Gravis punchy, fisty, shooty guys called? Aggressors. Not a fan of aggressors. I don't know what I'm gonna do to fix up the aggressors, but I am now a big fan of Inceptors. Thanks for watching.